Welcome to the Community Services Connection podcast, an informative podcast for those who live, work, and play in our paradise. We're covering everything from recreation and pools, libraries and history, parks and natural resources, and the UF-IFAS Extension Office of Charlotte County. I'm Brianna Benavenga, and today we have Dr. Jennifer Zoebelein here with us. She's our historian for the county, and if you didn't know, Jennifer has the coolest job in the county, and we're proud to have her in community services.
Thanks so much for having me, Brianna.
Charlotte County is celebrating, is it our 102nd birthday this month?
Correct, yes. We are at 102 this year.
Jennifer, give me your elevator pitch. We have so many new residents moving to Charlotte County, so what are some of the most important things you want them to know historically about how we got to where we are today?
So I think one of the interesting things about Charlotte County, right, we sit between Sarasota and Lee, which do get more traffic than we do. But, you know, Charlotte County is smaller, but still very special, still has a very long history. People tend to only focus on 1921 to the present, but I think it is really important to look past that and look beyond that in the sense of the broader development or the broader history of Southwest Florida and South Florida in general, and kind of how Charlotte County fits into that. And then, you know, I also, since we are here, you know, talking, you know, about history and that sort of thing, I would be remiss if I didn't say, you know, Charlotte County Libraries and History is really a very special part of the county. You know, we offer a lot of different programs and services to county residents and to snowbirds as well. This is not, and I think maybe that's something folks don't always realize, is they think, oh, well, I'm not a resident of Charlotte County, so I can't possibly access all these things, which is not true at all. All of our spaces are available for anyone at any time, which is really nice.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that, especially because we, like you said, we have so many people coming down here, and they're in Lee County and Sarasota County, and we're right in the middle. So come check us out if you're in the area or driving through. What brought you into this position? Are you from Charlotte County?
So I am not even from Florida. In fact, I did not know where Charlotte County was on a map before I took the job, and had never lived at all in Florida, which maybe is something special down here, right? A lot of folks have been coming here for 20, 30 years or more. No, so I'm originally from Long Island and have made my way through various places over the last 20 years or so. I did my undergraduate in Virginia, my master's in South Carolina, and then my PhD in Kansas. I've also worked for the New York Historical Society, for the National Park Service, for the National World War I Museum and Memorial. So it's, for me, what has always been important. History certainly has always been important to me for a very long time. But my passion really is conveying history to people. And so, you know, whether it was working at the Historical Society in more of a visitor services front desk capacity, or the National Park Service, where I was doing frontline interpretation at Fort Sumter National Monument, or at the World War I Museum and Memorial, where doing more behind the scenes work, kind of putting together interpretive material for our website. It really is always important to me to bring that history to people. And that is something that, you know, right, I started here in November of 2019, and the pandemic hit only a few months later. So it was a very interesting experience that first year or so. And fortunately, though, I will say, the positive of the pandemic was that I was able to catch up and really read and learn about not only Charlotte County history, but Florida history as well, which I had never studied in any capacity before. And once, you know, we came on the other side of the pandemic, really being able to get out into the community, doing outreach, and for the last few months since Hurricane Ian, working out of the Punta Gorda Library, and being able to work with frontline staff and interact with patrons, both in a library capacity in the sense of the questions that we get there, but then also being available for people that do come in and have questions about local history. And, you know, we are fortunate. We have a local history collection for checkout at all of the library branches. So, and that is something I think most people don't know. It sometimes gets a little hidden. Punta Gorda has a larger space than the other ones, But each branch does have a local history collection, and we do have our own archival collection as well.
And are all the collections a little bit different from each other, or are they all the same?
So there are similarities. There are certain books that we have that are standard across the board, but then we do try to make sure that materials that, say, pertain to Inglewood. So, for example, there is a book that was written by a resident of Rotunda about the history and the development of Rotunda West. That we had, the only copy we have actually in circulation is at the Inglewood Library because it is appropriate for it to be there. And same with Port Charlotte or Punta Gorda, there are certain resources that are more regionally specific. However, residents should know, and county folks should know too, that these materials can circulate throughout the county. So it doesn't matter where you live. My hope would be that people are willing and able to access material and we can get it to you. And that's really the nice part about it.
That is nice. And that's just scratching the surface on some of the services that we offer.
So we have a lot of different kinds of resources. In the buildings themselves, again, as I said, there's a local history collection in each library. And yes, as you pointed out, prior to Hurricane Ian, at Mid-County, we did have a genealogy section. Now, even though we don't have that material right now, we do still have access to genealogical websites. So, for example, Ancestry, which is the most common and usually the most well-known. You can access that from the libraries. So if you come into any of the libraries, either using your own laptop or one of ours, as long as you are on the public network, you can access Ancestry. We have a link right on the web, on the Libraries and History website, and you will be able to use it right there. Now, it is library use only, but it still does allow people to come and do that sort of research. And we do have a couple other databases as well. And for folks out there who have never accessed our website, the Libraries and History website, this really is a treasure trove of information. It's not only library information. History Services has its own part of the website. And so on there, you can access the historical information on all of our historical markers. You can access information on all the videos we did during the centennial. Those are all available there. You can access information on our centennial signs. So during the centennial, we did an interpretive sign program where we dedicated a new sign in a county park each month of the centennial. So if you're out there and you're in a county park, keep an eye out for a brown sign. It'll have a photograph from the collection and a little information. And all of that is linked on our website as well. We have information about the cemeteries. So there are several historic cemeteries in Charlotte County. You have the Carl Bailey Cemetery in Cleveland. You have the Charlotte Harbor Cemetery, and then you have Indian Spring Cemetery. And so there's information on that as well. One of our biggest, and I would say arguably our most important research on the website is the online archives. So this is, and it's very easy to find. We created a bar for it right at the top on the front page, on the main page of the website. And you just go on to that, click on that, and we have over 4,000 items in that collection.
Wow. That's a lot.
Yes. And it's mostly photographs. There are a few other types of material in there, but for the most part, it is photographs. We are very fortunate. One of the local historians in Charlotte County, U.S. Cleveland, who passed away, it's been over 15 years now, but he had amassed quite a number of photographs and just materials, and whether it was a copy of a copy or the original, and so he gave all of that to Charlotte County. A lot of it, particularly after Hurricane Charlie, he almost lost his house effectively after Charlie. And so we got all of that. And so a lot of stuff is in there, from postcards to aerial photographs, things of that nature, from a broad range of Charlotte County's history, covering all elements of the county. So Inglewood, Port Charlotte, Punta Gorda. And our plan moving forward is to keep adding to that. So right now, our librarian archivist, Sam Alexander, is working on several projects where we will be able to move that material, once it's digitized, onto the online archives. So things like floor plans from development companies that we're marketing in Charlotte County.
That's
so we'll
really
have those.
cool.
or more Hurricane Charlie photographs. He actually came across an entire collection of photographs that had not been cataloged. So things like that, maps that we can add. And this is really, I think, a hidden resource. I really think most people who live and visit Charlotte County, they don't know these resources exist. And these photographs are there for people to use. You can download them. You can, save them. You can print them out and put them on your wall at home if you really want to. So we really do have a lot of these ways in which history is out there. It's just a question of being able to find it. So if you've ever seen one of the big green signs, right, those are our historical markers. And we do try to, some of them are in really prominent positions, but some of them are in lesser known spots. We do also have a newspaper collection, which was also housed with the genealogy collection at Mid-County. So that newspaper collection, it's all microfilm. Eventually, someday, it will be digitized. But that covers Charlotte County newspapers from as far back as the 1890s and going all the way up through the 2000s. Wow. There are some years that are missing, but it really offers a unique look into Charlotte County's history. So, for example, and I did some of this research during the centennial, if you want to learn more about, say, the 1931 bridge opening, the bridge dedication across the Peace River, well, you can go to the 1931 Punta Gorda Herald and it's front page. It's not always clear. Some of the photographs are not very clear anymore, but you can still read about that and hear, well, what did they do and how did they celebrate these moments in Charlotte County's history? And then we also have two historic buildings. And one of them is pretty well known, and that's the Cookie House, which is out at Cedar Point Environmental Park. Originally part of the Bass Biological Laboratory, which was Florida's first full-time marine station. The Cookie House is the only remaining building from that site. It was moved to where it is now in 2006, was preserved, was restored, and is open for visitation. Unfortunately, it is not open year-round, but for folks listening in, the next time they'll be able to go will be come next January. And so we usually open it January, February, and March. Usually, at least the schedule we've done this year and last year, is on Fridays, so people can come out and visit.
Awesome, and that tends to draw a lot of people because there's people visiting the park. You have the environmental center right there. There's so much happening at Cedar Point Environmental Park, so definitely try to get out there and see.
Absolutely, yeah, and the park is great about helping promote that. They do programming, and they're always willing to let people know that we are open, and we make sure to put that information out there. And then the other building, which is not open to the public, but you can visit it, or you can see it, is the Placida Bunkhouse, which is at the head of the Cape Hayes Pioneer Trail. So for folks who are not familiar with the trail, if you're driving on 776 and you head out to Gasparilla Road and you take that left like you're going out to Boca Grande, Cape Hayes Pioneer Trail will be on your right, just past the shopping center. And you will not be able to miss the bunkhouse. It doesn't look very pretty. Unfortunately, it has not been restored, but it does have its own historical marker. And there is also a marker there for the town of McCall as well. And the bunkhouse is actually older than the Cookie House. It was built in 1907 by the Charlotte Harbor and Northern Railroad to house workers. It too was moved to its current location for preservation purposes. But we are very fortunate to have these two buildings because they both reflect and represent Charlotte County history. But they speak to the fact that, yes, there is still history and there is still historic buildings in 2023. And I think sometimes people need to be reminded of that because people think, well, everything, there's so much development, there's so much change. And there is. But there's always been that. Throughout history, there has been development and change, but it doesn't mean that those resources necessarily go away.
Right. Is there anything that your team specifically does to preserve some of those resources? Like I know you work with the Cookie House, but what else are you doing to make sure that, those historical buildings stay where they are and stay untouched?
So really it is bringing awareness about these buildings. So it is, in the case of the Cookie House, we are fortunate we can open that building. We can talk to people about the history and share that with people on site. Now, the bunkhouse, even though we can't go in, something that we have considered is doing programming at the site to where we would at least be able to talk about the history, even though visitors can't go inside. maybe they'll get a glimpse of the several iguanas that are currently floating about. But one of our big upcoming projects, which we are really excited about, is going to be an interpretive signage along the Cape Hayes Pioneer Trail. So it will actually be, and you won't have to start in either, it won't matter where you start at the trail, because you can access it both from the northern and the southern end. And it will talk not only about the railroad history, because that trail follows the old Charlotte Harbor and Northern Railroad. So we'll talk about that. But, we also want to work with Parks and Natural Resources to include that information as well, because that trail is heavily used, especially by people biking. So it's a bike trail. People can walk it as well. So the idea is, and this is really something that I'm always, thinking about is, well, if people don't come to the libraries, right? If you aren't a library user, and there's no judgment, right, about that, how can we bring history to you? How can we get history out there? And one of the ways we can do that is interpretive signage. So like the markers, certainly the centennial signage that we did, but now these, so where you can be going about your day and you can come across this, and maybe you read it, maybe you don't, but hopefully it kind of fosters that knowledge, and maybe you'll come and ask questions, and maybe you'll want to know more.
That is so cool. I'm really looking forward to that. Will it be like a virtual reality type of thing, or will it just be kind of scan with your phone and then information will...
So they will be physical signs along the trail, and then the idea would be that each will hopefully have a QR code or something where people can scan for more information that would link to then things either in the online archives or books in the collection or things like that.
Now, I know you brought a game today, and since I am fairly new to the area, I thought it would be really fun to play some trivia, and then everybody listening can play along as well.
Fantastic. Let's do it.
All right. What do you got?
All right. So my first question is a true-false. So true-false. Charlotte was selected as the name for the new county due to the prominence of Charlotte Harbor within the new boundaries.
False.
Is actually true. So it very interestingly, and we'll back up here a second just to kind of put this in context. So Charlotte County is created in 1921 as part of a larger legislative package that broke up DeSoto County. So DeSoto County, when it was created in 1887, included what is today DeSoto, Charlotte, Highlands, Glades, and Hardy. It was a very large county, and this was not unusual for the time. Remember, in the 19th century, there are not a lot of folks living in South Florida at all. It's not until the late 19th, early 20th century where we have a lot more people. So there was no need to have smaller counties. However, as the area develops, right, you start to see this push in Punta Gorda, which was the only established city. It does not mean it was the only community. Certainly it wasn't. But you start to see this push for a new county, because if you lived in Punta Gorda or Charlotte Harbor, you had to go to Arcadia, which was the county seat of DeSoto, right? If you were in Inglewood, you were a little bit luckier because you could always cross over into what became Sarasota,
right?
And it was a little, but even still, but it's still a pretty good distance. So you see this, it ends up being about a 20-year fight for the division of DeSoto. And finally in 1920, the divisionists, as they're known, and you see this in the newspapers, they win out. And the Punta Gorda Herald does this survey in the newspaper. And all sorts of names were proposed. Some of them are absolutely ludicrous, and thank goodness they were not selected. One of them was Fruitville. There was a lot of like fruit and citrus possibilities, and you think, man, I'm so glad our county doesn't have that name. But eventually Charlotte was deemed the most popular because of the prominence of Charlotte Harbor within the boundaries. Okay. Right? So if you look at Charlotte County today, what is the thing that dominates? And it is Charlotte Harbor and the Peace River. So.
Oh, I thought that was a trick question.
And I thought I was starting off with a softball question, but that's okay. No, and I think, right, people, this is one of those things where what's in a name, right? We don't think about where counties or cities, where do they get their names? So there you go. All right, next one. In what year was the first bridge built across the Peace River? 1931, 1915, 1921, or 1945?
I'm going to go with A, 1931.
The very first bridge built across the Peace River was completed in 1921. The same year, in fact, only a few months after Charlotte County became its own county. So Charlotte County, that legislation passed on April 23rd, 1921. The bridge was dedicated July 4th, 1921. Interestingly, that bridge project originated in 1915 during the First World War, had been put on hold, and by 1921, when it is dedicated, it is already outdated, which is why only 10 years later you see the dedication of a new bridge, which is the Baron Collier Bridge, the first Baron Collier Bridge, which is what is now US 41 North.
Gotcha.
Now, just for those, right, a lot of folks out here, we cross bridges, right? We have the bridges over the Peace River, the bridges over the Myakka, the bridges to get out into, out onto Inglewood Beach, right, in Manasota Key. The 1931 bridge is not the exact bridge that is there today. The 1931 bridge, the first Baron Collier Bridge, stayed in existence for over 40 years. By the 1970s, it was evident that one bridge wasn't cutting it. And for those of you out there that drive across these bridges, even sometimes having two sides, it gets very busy. So what they do is they build a second bridge. So you have a replacement bridge for the original Baron Collier, and then you have an additional bridge. So two bridges, one US 41 North, one US 41 South, officially known as the Baron Collier Bridge and the Albert Gilchrist Bridge after Governor Gilchrist. Gotcha. So, and a lot of folks don't know that. That also could have been a question, but yeah.
All right, maybe this one. Maybe number 3
This one you should, yes. So the historic Cookie House was once part of the Bass Biological Laboratory, Florida's first full-time marine station. True or false?
That is true.
Fantastic. Yes, good. Bought by landowner and developer Baron Collier during the 1920s land boom, the old Hotel Punta Gorda was renamed this: the Seminole Hotel, the Hotel Charlotte Harbor, the Inglewood Inn, or the Princess Hotel. So this is the old Hotel Punta Gorda, which would have been right in downtown. We had a marker for it. Unfortunately, we lost it during Ian. But for those of you listening, if you've been downtown Punta Gorda in that big kind of empty area right off Marion, that's that is roughly where the hotel would have been. Okay. So again, so Seminole Hotel, Hotel Charlotte Harbor, Inglewood Inn, and the Princess Hotel.
I'm going to go with Hotel Charlotte Harbor.
Correct.
Oh,
yes.
Okay.
Yes. So that becomes so Baron Collier buys it. It had suffered years of neglect. He buys it and refurbishes it, adds onto it, and renames it the Hotel Charlotte Harbor. And yes, for those, if folks are listening and paying close attention, yes, this Baron Collier is the same person for whom that bridge is named after, because he put a lot of money and a lot of influence into Charlotte County. And he is on site for the dedication in 1931, as is the governor at the time.
Very cool.
All right, another true false. The oldest burial plot in Charlotte County is in Indian Springs Cemetery, which is in Punta Gorda, just for context. True or false?
True.
This one is false. And this one I did put in almost as a trick question, because I know usually folks associate Punta Gorda as being kind of the oldest part of Charlotte County. And, we could spend a whole conversation talking about when each of the areas of Charlotte Harbor or Charlotte County developed. But actually the oldest grave is Joel Knight's grave, and he is in the Charlotte Harbor Cemetery. So okay. Charlotte Harbor, and this is the community of Charlotte Harbor, not the body of water. So this would have been, if you're driving from Punta Gorda across US 41 North, when you right cross the bridge there, that was Charlotte Harbor. It was one of the oldest communities. In fact, there were settlers and pioneers there in the 1860s, prior to the founding of Punta Gorda.
Very cool.
And Joel Knight was one of those pioneers. In fact, him and his son had served the Confederacy during the Civil War and ran shipped cattle out of Charlotte Harbor to help supply the Confederacy during the war. So he had been here a long time, and he dies in 1879. All right, my last question. Much of the Cape Hayes Peninsula, including what is now Rotunda West, was once owned by this prominent family: Vanderbilt, Morgan, Rockefeller, or Carnegie.
That's a tough one.
It is a difficult one.
I'm going to go with Vanderbilt.
Yes. Very good.
All right.
So William and Alfred Vanderbilt, who are brothers, and we don't have time to talk about where they are in the Vanderbilt clan, but yes, it is the same Vanderbilt family that everyone knows and associates it with. So William and Alfred come down here. They buy 35,000 acres in what is now the Cape Hayes Peninsula in 1951. Several years later, in 1955, they will help fund a new marine laboratory in the Cape Hayes Marine Laboratory, which kind of fills the gap left behind by the Bass Biological Laboratory, which had closed in 1944. And then later, the Vanderbilts start selling off pieces of their property at an enormous value. They sell off a part to the Mackle brothers, which becomes Gulf Cove. And then the big sell is in 1969 when they sell the remaining acreage, which we're talking, over 10,000 acres here. They sell that to Joe Klein of Kavanaugh Corporation, and that becomes Rotunda, or the bulk of it becomes Rotunda. And the Vanderbilts got almost $20 million for that purchase.
Wow.
Yes. So this is, and it really is fun to track, and you can follow this in the newspapers. It's very fascinating to track the cost, what they pay, what they get from the Mackles when they purchase, when the Mackles purchase a piece, and then what Joe Klein pays. So it really is interesting to see that appreciation of value across the 1950s, right? And this corresponds with the development that's going on in Charlotte County, not just in what becomes Port Charlotte, but also in the Cape Hayes Peninsula, which I think a lot of people forget about because we always think about Port Charlotte and we think about the Mackles, but there's a whole lot of other stuff going on out in West County as well.
I think it'd be really fun, Jennifer, to have you back on the podcast and do an entire podcast on comparing prices of things way back when and now, and how much has changed. And that would be a lot of fun. So you'll definitely have to come back
Absolutely. And, there's a ton of information out there, and Charlotte County really does have quite a range of history. Not just from 1921 to now, but really, again, looking back before that and understanding how this all came about and how did Florida develop over the course of the 19th century and then into the 20th century, and how did Southwest Florida fit into all of that, and then, going smaller, how does Charlotte County fit into all of that? So it really is part of a bigger whole, and I'm a big proponent of understanding the big picture all the way down to the small level, because otherwise everything gets out of context and you just lose sight of it. So
yeah. Well, Jennifer, we appreciate you being on the podcast with us today. Where can people find you, find more information? If they have questions, can they reach out to you via email or phone number?
Absolutely. So right now, my temporary home is at the Punta Gorda Library. That's 401 Shreve Street in downtown Punta Gorda. So come on by. You can always shoot me an email. It's jennifer.zoebelein@charlottecountyfl.gov. And if you're not in the Punta Gorda area, or if if you're further afield and really needing to get a hold of me, drop by your local library and they will have my information, and you can get a hold of me that way. So
awesome. Well, thank you, Jennifer, and happy birthday, Charlotte County.
Yes, thank you so much, Brianna. I appreciate being here.